Welcome to Empowering Innovation, Trends and Triumphs, a podcast series dedicated to the success and challenges in innovation and growth within the UK tech startup scene.
Welcome to Empowered's latest podcast. We're covering, as in the past, a whole range of topics that are relevant both to our existing as well as prospective clients. Looking at a range of educational topics. Today, we're going to be talking about scaling the finance function and looking at talking about specifically things like fractional team leads that we can bring into an organization, specifically within the finance space. Talking here with me today, we've got Chris Bell, FinOps Lead from Rora. Chris, before we jump into this, I'll give you a moment to just, I guess, introduce yourself and some of your background, and then we can get straight into it.
Yeah, so I graduated a few years ago now. Went and worked at KPMG in audit and chartered as an accountant there, and then spent the 3-4 years after that working in various different startups across different sizes and industries, from property to tech, from sort of 5 employees up to 200. And then spent a little brief time last year trying to start my own business, doing a bit of coding in my spare time. And then I'm now working at Rora as a FinOps Lead, helping startups establish and scale a finance function.
Fantastic. And Rora's been, got a great presence within, especially around the southeast, but I'm sure sort of more widely across the UK as well as planned. But you're working with sort of organisations, what sort of size?
Yeah, so we provide fractional finance and people teams, soon to be legal as well, to startups and scale-ups from, I think like 0 employees all the way up to a few hundred employees. In various different capacities, both 1 or 2 days a week, or kind of interim full-time for a few months supporting on projects.
Like supporting discrete sort of projects that might be set up?
Yes,
The implementation of those.
Our accounts are a total mess. We need someone to come in for a few months to either advise on what they should look like or help just churn through some volume, and we can support with that.
Fine. So this is an area of huge interest, not just for all organizations, either recently set up, about to establish themselves, all the way through to those organizations that are scaling, that are looking to grow faster. Thinking about how can they understand the metrics that allow them to scale from a financial perspective. When we're thinking about the finance function, it can sound to a lot of people like quite a behemoth, and and adding in a lot of bureaucracy into an organization. And when you're just starting up and you're feeling super creative about the business,
people do get very scared of the finance function. As soon as cash or accounts is mentioned, everyone's like, "Oh, I don't know how to do that. Can't deal with that." But actually, it's just like a team like any other. You've got inputs and outputs, normally to do with data and how accurate it is or how it flows from one person to another. And establishing and setting up and scaling a finance function is just looking at those inputs and outputs and making sure that data's flowing through the team efficiently, just like any other team. And yes, there's some scary words, maybe debits, credits, and I think people often have a fear of doing things incorrectly, but actually most things can be corrected as long as you don't send all your cash to the wrong person. That's the sort of the one thing you make sure you don't do. But if something's a bit wrong, then you just sort of say, "Oh, that was wrong," communicate why and fix it and move on. Just like any other team, and people shouldn't be scared of it.
That's interesting because you're not using the word like finance as much in the finance function. You're not using the word cash, revenues. You're not using those credits and debits as much. It's more about flow of data. Treating it almost as that sort of metric function, right?
I mean, us at Rora, we I guess accounting generally have compliance, which is filing your accounts, making sure that things are categorized correctly and such, and operations, which is the doing of stuff. How do you get all your information in the right place? And particularly very early on, the compliance side of things is less burdensome. I would say once you're listed, for example, you have huge audits. If things are wrong, shareholders get annoyed, etc. Whereas when you're very small, even if you do have VC backers, often I think there's an acknowledgement that things aren't always correct, and across lots of different companies, you're constantly trying to put out fires. And as long as you always have a plan with how to fix the fires and sort of deal with things going forward, people will generally be understanding. And because I'm an operations person at heart, I think everyone at Rora is. I use my accountancy skills to sort of operate within the finance space, but ultimately, it's just like any other part of a company. You've got data, you've got people, you've got stakeholders. Just how do you glue all those things together?
And so when if you're sat there with we're sat there with two founders that have just set up their organization, they understand the compliance burden that they need to meet, but they don't understand what other value a finance function can add versus going out and hiring a marketing lead. Maybe feels a bit more tangible, or a salesperson. Right? Actually, maybe not marketing. The salesperson is probably the more tangible hire for them.
Yeah, I guess and I think that's often a gap when I work with startups or scale-ups. People don't see the value that finance can provide, and really finance is about helping facilitate decisions. And I guess the process of creating a budget, trying to execute against that, and understanding why you didn't hit the budget is just how you should go about any real decision making. I imagine that's how any founder or person goes about their own decision making just in their day-to-day life. You have an expectation, you try and hit it. If you didn't hit it, you figure out why, and then you use that information to go forward and end up kind of hopefully with a fairly reliable decision making process. And finance is the function that facilitates that for a business, really. And without that, you're not really learning sort of how the business operates. So tying revenue to cash, and if we hire these people, will that produce value for us? Unless you've created an expectation or a budget in finance terms, and unless you're tracking against how you've executed against that, you're never really going to kind of iterate on your learning. You're just going to hire someone, wonder why you haven't grown as much as you did, maybe fire that person and then hire a new person, and without really kind of sort of being able to back your decisions. And that's what finance brings to a business. It's like facilitating decisions.
Provides you with real world data that feeds then into the decision making. Right?
Exactly.
And just as you might use, NPS, right, feed into sort of whether the strength of the product market fit. That you've been able to generate. This enables you to make some of the commercial decisions. Commercial decisions around the business as well.
But I mean, I would even go beyond commercial decisions, because a good budget is where you tie everything together, really. Like, a budget doesn't just have to be, revenue is going to grow 2% every month. A good budget will have your full funnel and your full kind of commission calcs for sales teams, all your marketing spend, your PPC, click-through rates, etc. And if you give a good finance person the time and space to manage that, they will bring that all together for you across the whole business and really sort of drive forward your decisions. I think often people will bring in a finance person with some fractional finance capacity, but they won't sort of trust that they can help make decisions. It's just kind of, just do X, Y, Z. And that's where you end up in a place where people think that finance isn't adding value because they're just, the payment runs wrong. Like,
exactly. It's again kind of, it becomes the impression of the finance function is one of bean counting almost, right? It's a compliance thing. It's something that just needs to be done, but it's not going to add any value to the proactive management of the business looking forward. And actually recognizing that early on in your venture is hugely valuable.
And bean counting needs to be done.
Of course, yeah.
Because you need to know that your numbers are right.
Mm-hmm.
And just like anything outside of finance, like say you've got your dashboarding tool that's tracking your revenue. If you don't know that's right, then all your decisions are totally worthless. And then often you get 2-3 months or years down the line and someone says, oh, you know, all that revenue stuff was wrong. And then the founder will get pissed off, say, oh, why didn't we know this? And the reason you probably didn't know that was because you weren't trusting your bean counters to count the beans, to know what your revenue should have been. And where finance adds value is often because you've counted the beans, you then know best how to use them, or you know, kind of like in real world, you know what assumptions were made, you know, oh yeah, that was higher or lower, but actually we made this assumption, so that was expected. Mm-hmm. And it's often only the finance person or whoever's doing your budgeting or planning that can kind of play with the model. Like if you have a finance background, say in banking or private equity, you know that if you have a model, you can tweak things, and that's where you figure out your levers. Mm-hmm. And it's often your finance function who provides that to a business, particularly early on when you don't have the budget to hire X strategy consultants or whoever to do that for you.
Yeah, no, you've done a great job in just helping articulate the value of that finance function. It'd be helpful to understand whether this is something that needs to be bitten off all in one go by by an organization, or if there's, especially when you're starting up, whether you can, is there a spectrum?
Of course there's a spectrum, and every business, even within the spectrum, there are spectrums, because some may have high volume. You may be a high volume business or low volume, and they will have their own challenges. You might have a lot of credit control, for example. Mm-hmm. But yeah, absolutely. Early on, you don't need a full bells and whistles budget or finance team. Fractional is absolutely the way to go. I think what we're doing at Rora that's really helpful for startups, not a sales pitch. I do actually really believe in what we're doing. Mm-hmm. Often accountants provide compliance, and they will help you file your accounts. And every month or year, they'll say, give us the stuff and we'll give you something back. Yep. Whereas what we're trying to do at Rora is help you like build your internal processes to make things operate for you. And I think that's what you really need early on. Like, how do you make sure your business is growing in a way that's going to make your finance function successful later? So all these things about making sure your data is accurate, you need to lay the foundations early on. Because if you hire a bunch of junior people to process a bunch of transactions manually, that's great on day one, but maybe by kind of year 2, that manual processing, you're going to end up with inaccuracies, and you can fix them early on, but later down the line, you can't fix it anymore. And so early on, you need just that guidance to provide thoughts about how you can like implement your processes efficiently early on. And you don't need a full-time person for that, because you're small, you've only got a handful of processes, but you absolutely need a little bit of fractional help.
Okay, and that could be a day or 2 a week.
Yes, day or 2. I think even half day.
Half day a week. Yeah. And so it's this is in addition to the work that an accountant might do, right? The compliance type activity. So
yes,
so we're splitting up the finance function into 2 elements. There is the compliance side, and then there's the growth and management,
the operational side,
right? The operational side. So the compliance side, that any business needs to have in place, and they should have that in place from if not day one, but pretty sharp thereafter, to ensure that they're able to meet all their compliance their compliance requirements. But then this is moving into where the finance function can actually add value over and above just the reporting to Companies House, right, and filing your CD600, right. This is thinking about, hey, how can we take some of the financial data that we're capturing alongside the operational data, right, and allow us to build a stronger business, which is it's quite a mature step for for a founder to take straight away, like out of the gate. Because I mean, for most of us founders, the first step is, well, we need to get product market fit. We need to figure out who's going to buy this stuff, right? As opposed to, let's create the scaffolding around the organization so that we can, we've got a strong foundation to build on.
It's a scary thing, I think. Something that you don't really understand investing in it when you don't really know how or why it's going to give you a return. Particularly, you've got a set runway. You need to make sure every penny is spent well. But I think like fractional can help you see that value, because you don't need to invest too much upfront. You can generally have relatively short contracts, and you don't need to kind of go all in until you see some value.
Fine. And you can lean into it as the business, or as you recognize the value of it, and as the business begins to rely more on that as well.
Something I would also add, it's not necessarily just people that you should add to financing. You should also try and invest like technical resource into making sure that these processes operate effectively. I think a lot of businesses will often, with collecting cash, for example, we've got a load of cash needs to be collected. Let's hire an accountant to just deal with that. And that can kind of work at a small scale. But as soon as you have more than a couple of hundred invoices, it's a very difficult role to hire for, because it's not the most fun job, and it doesn't necessarily lead to many kind of career prospects that quickly. But also like manual work will just always fall behind in a volume space. And if you want to really have a scalable business, particularly if you're a tech business, your finance processes should be automated. And it shouldn't be on the finance team to say, we should switch off this account or not. You should have a centralized decision. These are the steps to switch off an account, and that should be codified in your product. And then no one ever needs to worry about it again. Often what a lot of businesses do is hire a finance team or some fractional capacity to try and add value, but then realize that there's all this high volume tasks that need to be done. The finance team will spend all their time doing these high volume tasks, and then the founder of the business will say, "You're not adding any value."
Exactly. Yeah.
And it's because they're not being supported by the business to operate efficiently.
And there's just a plethora of tools that are available now out there, whether it's spend management, whether it's like Zero, just being able to collate this information, whether it's being able to approve invoices, right? I mean, there's a lot that's out there, but I guess that's where you'd expect the founders to be able to ask somebody in a fractional role or an in-house finance lead to identify what tools are most suited for the organization. So I guess within the finance team, there's tools that they should be using. So spend management to process supplier invoices, pay employees, or process expenses, manage cards and things like that, or like invoicing integrations with CRMs. So as soon as a customer is onboarded, then everything flows through to the accounting software. And there's like peripheral stuff like Zapier and things like that the finance team should be using to kind of grease the wheels, if you will. But I think there's often some kind of intrinsic things within the product. So invoicing is a good example, for example. So invoicing is often like ideally done within the product, because as soon as someone clicks buy, they want to receive an invoice. But often credit control and chasing the invoice, if you don't have cards, say, is left to the finance team. And actually there's then this gap saying, this person hasn't paid the invoice. Can we switch off the service? And then you constantly have these meetings to kind of, these people haven't paid. Can we switch off their service? Oh no, we can't switch off their service because X, Y, Z is happening. And actually, if you
rather than have these meetings, if you have an admin panel that a lot of businesses will have their customer success team, and the customer success team can log in and view all the customer success data. That's often missing for the finance team to log in and have their panel of invoices or service that they can switch off at will. And that, I guess that's the point I was trying to get at.
Yeah, the automation of, I think the accounting profession as a whole, in the last couple of years has, again, you reuse an earlier phrase, has leaned in a lot into technology and seen it as not just a bookkeeping tool, but actually a tool that can add value to the profession, the accounting profession, and then also add value into things, through things like FP&A, like some of the analysis that you could do more proactively to demonstrate value into an organization. Is this the point at which we start to introduce these kinds of tools? Again, these are not sort of day one things, are they? These are more, what sort of metrics would a company use to judge when you need to start moving away from, first step is we've got an accountant, right? They do their compliance side. Next step, we've got a fractional, finance lead in. That's helping us understand, the growth and operational value around this financial data, and how that can allow for better decision making within an organization. From that one individual, what's the next step? Is it then bringing the tool set in?
Yeah, so I guess for a lot of the tools, earlier is actually better.
Okay.
But it won't necessarily be worth it immediately.
Yeah.
I think a really good example is some spend management platforms which let you have virtual cards, where on a per subscription basis, so most companies these days have dozens, if not getting on for hundreds of different subscriptions. And these spend management platforms let you create just a virtual card for each subscription, which once you need to switch something off, rather than needing to figure out who owns it, who has access, and then getting them to cancel it or switch off the direct debit, you can just log into the spend management platform and delete the card. And then the subscription will bounce and they'll cancel the subscription and you'll move on. The alternative to that, if you don't get in the spend management tool early on, is that all your subscriptions are on the same card normally. And that card is normally owned by the founder or some other senior person. And there will come a point where you need to cut costs and someone will say, oh, we've got all these subscriptions. Can we figure out who owns them? How do we switch it off? What does it do? All of this stuff. And that's suddenly a big task because it's all on this card and you don't have all the information categorized. It's just coming through this bank feed that's crowded with lots of other stuff. It becomes very difficult to do. Whereas if you'd set it up with a software initially, it's just slightly easier to deal with later. And the value of doing that it's
not prohibitive.
Yeah, it's not prohibitive. Yeah. And it only becomes a pain later. But so yeah, it's not going to stop you achieving your next raise or winning your next customer. But it's just like a nice thing to
good housekeeping.
Yeah, it's good housekeeping, and you'll miss out on a pain that is often really quite annoying.
Okay. Later on down the line.
Yeah. Another common issue actually is when all your subscriptions are on the same card and that card expires, and then all your subscriptions suddenly
cancelled,
go bang, and everyone's running around trying to put in this card, and you're often then sharing your card details with the tech team so that they can just sign up to subscriptions and stuff, and it works and will work fine for the first until it doesn't. And so that and many other platforms, it's just easier to create the business with those things ingrained. And another good one is equity management, where day one you don't need equity management, but with things like Vested, if you buy into their world early on, they can manage all of your articles of association and all of your options contracts.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if you try and come to them later, you've got your own articles, you've got your own this, that, and the other, and just trying to then buy into their kind of worldview is just that bit harder. And
fine. So I mean, there's not a requirement to buy into this suite of tools on day one.
Yeah.
But the value that they can add is something that you'd expect the finance function to present into the business.
Yeah.
And as we were saying, I mean, sometimes the cost of these things, many times actually, especially as an early stage business, the cost is not prohibitive at all.
No, yes, yeah.
I mean, it may be across the set of subscriptions you have, you're looking at a couple £100 a month or something, right? I mean, and that kind of then sets you up to be able to, it sets you up with a strong foundation that you can then grow on.
Yeah.
So we've moved from a business, that was an idea. Now we've got these two founders. They've established the business. They've got an accountant. They've got a fractional finance lead that's in. There's a set of tools that they've got in that allow them to manage some of the, not just the bookkeeping, some of the financial functions. Where from there for an early stage business, is there more, or is that then your finance function is good to go and you're
So I guess like your goal for that early stage is you've got your compliance kind of set up. You're filing your accounts as they should be. You're doing your VAT returns. You're sending invoices when they need to be sent, and you're collecting cash fairly consistently. You're paying all your suppliers. That's all okay. And I think this doesn't necessarily need to happen, but I think ideally you as the founder are looking at your financial statements at least every month and just either sense checking with the finance team what things mean, or just kind of being comfortable that everything's as it should. And the data in those financial statements are tying back to what you're seeing elsewhere in the business. I think that's kind of your goal early on. And then after that, everything after that is kind of whether if you've got investors, maybe they need some reporting or things like that. But I think if you can be reviewing your financial statements, there's no one complaining too much, and you're happy with how things are ticking along, then that's kind of a good base. And then after that, I think next step is you're shooting for your next funding round, or you're kind of looking to expand internationally. You're trying to prove some stuff within the business, and then that will then trigger the next step. So, okay, cool. We're ready to expand internationally. We're ready to raise the next round. We're ready to hire kind of 100 salespeople. Mm-hmm. I think that's the trigger to say, okay, cool. Finance team, let's take it up to the next step. Let's get our FP&A tight. Let's create a really strong budget, and let's figure out how we execute against that. And that's the next step.
Fine. We'll pick up on that in the second part of this podcast. But we've spoken a lot about this external finance person that can support an organization in the early stages, right? How do you go about finding this this elusive person that's going to add value, that's not going to be a distraction or seen as a distraction by these two founders?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm lucky in the sense that I would have a network of people I could ask. But yeah, often I think the way is recruiters normally, or if you are in the market for a fractional resource, then they will often be able to support you with figuring out, I guess, the types of skill sets you need, as well as putting you in touch with some recruiters or perhaps people in their network who can fulfill that role.
But I guess my question is more about that first hire. Like, how do you figure out the first hire, and whether you've got the right attributes within that individual that's not going to over-engineer it, but at the same time not kind of leave you just looking at the compliance side and not really adding as much value.
Yeah. So I guess who is that first hire is is a hotly debated thing, I guess, that you could go junior, senior, and it's similar to any other role, really. Like what are the trade-offs that you want to make for that first person? And also, what is your business like? So if you're, I keep using these out, if you're a high volume business, that's a slightly different situation. So if you're a high volume like e-commerce business, or like a high volume tech business where you can perhaps rely on tech a bit more, I personally would generally go with kind of either the upper seniority level of the middle or the bottom of the top kind of. So sort of either a junior FD or a senior lead or head of, where they're still junior enough to want to get stuck in and get their hands dirty, but they're senior enough to kind of have some confidence in their decisions and can rely on some experience to kind of say this would or wouldn't work. And I think, as with any early hire, you want to try and find a jack of all trades if you can. But I think within finance, that can often be a bit tricky.
Yeah, I think the hiring of a jack of all trades is quite a common trait within a lot of early stage employees within organizations. So that shouldn't be, sort of, I guess, foreign for for early stage business to find somebody that can get their hands dirty first of all, but then have some experience of the wide spectrum of activities that can fall within the remit of the finance function.
I guess a big thing that founders should think about when hiring that first person is how to get some efficiencies across finance and operations. Often you have a bunch of kind of, and I guess this is perhaps just how to think about that. What does that jack of all trades mean? Like what are the range of skills that they need to do? You often have your various supporting functions within a business. So finance, operations, just doing sort of general help with everyone, and then people, legal, and sort of talent. And often businesses will have a head of operations that they will then hire a finance lead to report into. And then the finance lead will take over perhaps people and legal, and then the operations function will sit separately. I think something that people don't often consider is hiring a finance person to manage the operation. Because actually, finance is it's easier for a finance person to pick up operations than it is for an operations person to pick up finance. And so, I think that's just something to consider.
Fine. Hugely valuable. And just like a final question in this section, at least on the podcast. Again, hiring somebody at the top of the mid-range or the bottom of the top range, right, is can be a pretty significant investment for an early stage business. Hence the opportunity through fractional finance leads to bring some of that experience in, but in the amount, in the pill size, appropriate for the business.
Yes. Yeah. And it also lets you kind of test drive what the role looks like, and also kind of different people who, like, if you come across a really great fractional person and you're on a road to success, then I'm sure that fractional person will probably want to come work full time. Okay. And it is actually something that,
so route to employment. Is that common?
It is. I think it's fairly common at Rora, and I think we have a recruitment fee to kind of make sure that Rora is made good. But it is reasonably common.
It's almost like a try before you buy kind of type, right? But and if the organization, if the mission, vision, sort of values of the organization fit with the finance lead and the finance lead's experience, as well as sort of vision and attributes supportive of the business, there's an opportunity there to kind of turn that from a half day a week sort of engagement into a full time. When it's appropriate for the business.
And you can normally ramp it up through Rora. So you start with 1.5 day a week and then slowly ramp up. Given the nature of how we operate as well, you can ramp up both the lead as well as kind of manager and sort of very junior.
Mm-hmm.
So if you need invoice processing, things like that, you can kind of onboard some more associates, as we call them. And then when you need some more strategic help, you up the lead, and then you kind of slowly work your way up until you decide, oh, okay, cool, now we need someone full-time, pull the trigger. And if you've had a good experience in that, you can perhaps have a conversation with the people you've been working with about whether they would want to go full-time.
Great. Any final comments here in this section for the early stage founder or founding team thinking about the value of the finance function, or how to go about getting it set up?
Yeah, I think I would just perhaps reiterate the idea that you shouldn't be scared of finance and accounting data. It's just more data within the business, and you should treat it in the same way you do any other area of the business. You should make sure that you have processes to make sure it's accurate, and you should drill into it to understand why movements have happened. Don't just sort of go, oh yeah, I'm either scared of that or I don't understand it.
Excellent. Okay, well look, thank you for that, and we'll reconvene looking at the finance function for scale-up organizations.
Looking forward to
and how they scale. Thank you.
Cheers.
This podcast has been brought to you by Empowered, a platform and service for R&D tax credit claims.